Hello, my name is Braden Ty, and this will be my presentation for my applied project in SPE 593. The first aspect of this applied project was defining a problem of practice within educational settings. So the problem of practice that I decided to focus on was the problem that educational staff are providing too much prompting, not enough time for students to think about things when they ask them questions. This is something that I've seen personally, as well as something that I've heard anecdotally from other colleagues. It's especially concerning considering that many children with special education services are guaranteed additional time for thinking, processing, and problem solving, not just in test taking scenarios, but also in just regular classroom settings or when being asked a question. To this end, I developed a research question that looked at to what extent does increased think time affect ELA IEP goal development for students in the 6th, 7th, and 8th grades in a self-contained multi-grade level cross-categorical special education program at Sonoma Middle School in the Flagstaff Unified School District. Now, I want to talk about three things with this research question. The first is this has undergone many iterations. The first iteration was too vague, so I did not include specifically where the study was taking place, what the sample group of the study was. So I really wanted to make sure that there was no confusion about that, which is why I included the 6th, 7th, and 8th grades in the self-contained cross-categorical special education program. Now, this study is only taking place at Sonoma Middle School in the Flagstaff Unified School District. If it were a larger study, I would have not included this, but because it's taking place at one middle school, I want there to be no confusion about that. And then I received feedback from my instructor that I should only focus on one subject area rather than trying to tackle multiple subject areas, which is why I reduced the ELA and mathematics IEP goals down to just ELA. That gave me a more focused viewpoint that I could more easily analyze and understand the data. With that in mind, I'd like to go over some definitions. So the first definition is wait time. This is paramount to the study as it's the thing that we're really measuring. It is the amount of time that an instructor gives a student to process or think about a problem or question before providing feedback, assistance, and additional prompting. Now, what is prompting? Well, prompting is a verbal or gestural cue from an educational staff aimed at redirecting or sustaining students' attention during lessons, activities, or exercises. This is another aspect that we will be measuring, another measurement instrument. How many times are educational staff actually prompting students during a given lesson? Now, we will also be looking at task accuracy. This is another point of measurement, and it's really the measurement of success in an activity or an educational exercise based on pre-established guidelines. That's very important. Pre-established guidelines is something we'll get into in a little bit. These activities are typically include developmentally appropriate expectations and baseline data for the students in the sample group. Now, the reason that I specified IEP goal progress or regression, specifically IEP development, is because this is something that students are used to. They already have familiarity with. It is developmentally appropriate. It's differentiated and it's easily accessible, measurable. So all of these things make it the perfect measurement tool for this research assignment. Now, the last thing is task independence. It's basically how independently those students are completing those tasks accurately. So we're looking at not only the independence in the task completion, but also the accuracy. And this is calculated as a quantitative data point that is the ratio between task accuracy and the total number of prompts given by educational staff. So now that we have all the definitions out of the way, let's move on to our data collection process. In the pre-intervention and post-intervention phases of this research assignment, the data collection process stayed the same. So we were really looking at the development, either the progression or regression on IEP goals. That was calculated based on an average of all of their ELA goals. Each student has on average 2 to 3 ELA goals, and we take the average of those scores and we average them out. And that was the score that we were using for this part of the data collection process. And remember, I said Each of those goals is differentiated. It's meeting the kids at their age appropriate level. So it's the perfect measurement tool. Next, the paraprofessional prompting intervals were calculated based on pre-recorded lessons. So each lesson over the 3-week data collection period was recorded and then reflectively analyzed. Now, in order to protect student and staff identities, these videos were deleted immediately following the data collection and analysis process, but a transcript of the videos with timestamps was retained. This transcript had any identifiable information removed to maintain student anonymity. Prior to this data collection process, a permission slip as well as a copy of the research proposal was sent home and signed by the parents who wanted their children to participate in the study. This was part of the ethical considerations for this project. Each paraprofessional was wearing a microphone during the recording. That way, it made it easy to analyze their audio later afterwards. That way, the creation of the transcript with timestamps was more easy for myself because it was a very time-consuming process. As you can imagine, 20 hours of video footage, as well as multiple people speaking at the same time. It was a very labor-intensive process to really get those accurate intervals. So with that in mind, I'm going to give you a little snippet of what that looked like. Here I have some of the data for this assignment. And first, I would like to look at the way that the scores were calculated. So at the top there, you can see this is our IEP averages for each student. Obviously, there were more than 7 students. This is just a snippet. There were actually 21 students who participated in this study. And we were looking at the percentage of change between their initial averages and their final averages. And this was during the pre-intervention period. So we did this in the pre-intervention period as well as the post-intervention period. What you're seeing now is the pre-intervention period. So that top student, student number 1, their initial score was 36 on their IEP averages. Their final score was 40. So the percent change was 0.1% change. Now this, I want to clarify again, is not all subject areas. This is just in ELA. This study was specifically only looking at ELA goals. Now we did this for every single student. The pre-intervention period spanned a period of 2 weeks, and that gave us ample time to look at how their IEP goals were progressing over that pre-intervention baseline period. This was just normal classroom procedure. I gave no direction to change how frequently they were being prompted. And obviously, the simple fact of being recorded will probably skew the data a little bit, but overall, this gives me a good idea of what a normal classroom procedure would look like and how frequently paraprofessionals are prompting, as well as the changes in scores. This bottom box looks at the total number of prompts as well as the average prompting interval. And then there is also a section that looks at those prompting intervals with outliers excluded. So the outliers were prompts that were greater than 10 seconds or less than half a second. And I believe that's a more refined viewpoint, because if you have the outliers included, it really skews the data in a certain direction that is not accurate of what the actual classroom procedure looks like. Moving on, here are some graphs that really condense the data into a more visual viewpoint. That top left graph is looking at the average interval between question and further prompting, feedback, or response from paraprofessionals. The blue chart is pre-intervention and the red chart is post-intervention. And as you can see, there's a huge jump in paraprofessional prompting between the pre-intervention and post-intervention. Now, when I'm saying intervention, I'm talking about a specific time where I sat all of the paraprofessionals involved in the study down. We watched some videos and talked about how to provide additional think time for students. So you can see that intervention really made a huge difference in the amount of time that those paraprofessionals were giving students to think about questions before providing them with additional prompting. Specifically, you can see it's less than 2 seconds in the pre-intervention period and then greater than 8 seconds in the post-intervention period. Now, the top right graph is looking at the average percent change between the pre-intervention and post-intervention period. As you can see, in the pre-intervention period, the average change in ELA IEP progress was negative 0.02%. So this means that students were having their scores on average go down by 0.02% during the pre-intervention period. And as you can see in the post-intervention period, their ELA IP goals actually went up. Now, this is not statistically significant, just because the change is not drastic enough to say whether or not the intervention had any impact on their IEP goals. But it is interesting to note that there was a change between the pre-intervention and post-intervention period. Now, that bottom left graph is looking at the average interval as it's related to the total number of prompts. So as you can see, the total number of prompts given during a lesson does not really have a significant impact on the average interval in both the pre-intervention and post-intervention period. As you can see, that line represents the change or the slope of the graph, and it's pretty much zero. There's no change in the average interval based on how many times paraprofessionals are providing prompting, which I thought was interesting. It's not something that I would have expected. Finally, that last graph is the percent change per student. So each one of those students is a different student that we measured in this study. And the blue line represents the pre-intervention period and the red line represents the post-intervention. As you can see, some students responded better to the intervention than others, whereas some students really actually did not respond very well to the intervention. And it actually was better for them if they did receive more prompting, which is another interesting aspect of this study. And here I just have the results contained in more condensed form. So the results are the intervention with a high level of certainty made an impact on prompting intervals. However, the intervention made a very small, but ultimately statistically insignificant change on progress on IEP goals. So as far as principled innovation goes, I believe this project can be best described by the performance aspect of principled innovation. This is because I was required to design and develop creative solutions to problems. And the other aspect of this project that I had to really take into consideration was navigating uncertainty and mitigating negative outcomes. Obviously, when you're working with students, this is a huge concern. Ethically, we want to make sure that we're making the most positive impacts on the students as possible and minimizing the negative impacts on those students. As far as future growth goes, I'm going to be utilizing assessments and data to test various educational methods and approaches. This is something that I can integrate into my educational career, and not just this applied project, but something that I can use in future educational pursuits to see whether or not my interventions are actually making a significant difference on students. With that in mind, here are my sources for everything included in this presentation, and I really hope you enjoyed. I had a lot of fun putting this project together, and I think that it really gave me some significant insights into how prompting affects student outcomes. Anyway, thank you so much.